VSIN by the books, right here on VSIN.
We are back. VSIN by the books. Dave Ross and Jensen Lewis here on a Thursday, 1 week from today. Will be the NFL draft, and I know it does feel like, boy, how much the popularity of the draft has risen in the last 10, 15 years. It's really off the charts. NFL's done a great job of becoming basically a 365 league. To help us break it down, the Niners are sitting at the 11 spot. Evan Giddings, kind enough to join us here from 49ers pre- and post-game host for 95.7 The Game. Give him a follow on X at Evan A. Giddings joins us now here in the Progressive Guest Line. Evan, it's odd if you're a Niner backer and or, say, a Cowboy backer at 12 and the Niners at 11, because you normally don't get to draft this high. But that shows you the disappointment of last year with all the injuries. Big picture here, not just at 11, but we had talked off the air. Really not a lot being done in free agency. How important is this draft for the Niners?
First of all, thank you for having me on, and good morning. It's colossal. It's huge because the San Francisco 49ers have essentially positioned themselves to go all in on this NFL draft. And while they have the capital to do it, they have 11 picks, the most ever in the John Lynch Shanahan era. They have the highest draft position that they've had since 2020, when they, of course, traded up to get that quarterback, Trey Lance, which has fallen through. They have not done much this offseason. They've basically set themselves up to pay their quarterback, to strip themselves of all else in terms of cash, positions, and added fat to this roster. Deebo Samuel is gone. They have turned things around by not re-signing Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga. They've cut Javon Hargrave, all players that were a part of, in some way, shape, or form, their last run to a Super Bowl defeat to the Kansas City Chiefs. So the San Francisco 49ers are moving in a cheaper, younger direction, and that means you got to hit on the NFL draft. So this is a massive one for them this season.
Yeah, Evan, you look at the defense overall. Robert Saleh comes back, and I know there was already a euphoria for him to come back and be under Kyle Shanahan, the success that he had before moving on as a head coach. Do you focus more, if you're John Lynch and company, on the defensive line, or is it the secondary and perhaps a cornerback that jump out to you at 11?
Well, I don't think it's a coincidence that all three of the highest odds as far as position for the 49ers, I believe, are defensive line, offensive line, and then cornerback. And I think even you can get some juice as far as linebacker is concerned. The Niners got to improve that defense. They got to get better in the trenches. And I think defensive line is where it starts. When the Niners have made deep postseason runs, they have gotten to the quarterback. And I don't think it's a coincidence you see a team like the Philadelphia Eagles in recent memory invest the kind of stock they do in their D-line. When the Niners have had less than 44 sacks, they have not made the postseason. When they have been their best, it's because they have gotten to the quarterback. 44 sacks in 2019, 44 sacks in 2021, 48 sacks their most recent Super Bowl run. So when they get to the quarterback, they're extremely good, and that means you got to put your money where your mouth is. And Nick Bosa right now is the only remaining defensive lineman to start last season that is right now on the roster. So I do think that Robert Saleh is a great DC. I think he is an incredible mind on that side of the football, but you need talent there as well to work with. And while I think he can be the tide that raises all boats, eventually you're going to have to get him a couple of guys that can get off the edge, that can get through that interior defensive line. And right now the 49ers just don't have any of those guys. So if I was going to bet, I think where I'm going, it's got to be defensive line.
You know, it's interesting because, Evan, I'm looking here at DraftKings, and you normally don't see three positions this evenly priced, to your point here. Defensive line / edge is plus $2. Cornerback is plus $260, but the smaller favorite is O-line at plus $1.50. Do you think that's the conversation? Because you think about Kyle, I covered his dad obviously in D.C., and all those moving linemen, you want to get him out there in the run game, how important that is to support Brock Purdy, and yet Robert Saleh comes in, as you mentioned here, and might be pushing for it, either edge lineman or corner. How much of that is a conversation with John and with Kyle as to what is the right way to reframe this team?
Well, I think it's somewhat of a philosophical shift because, to my knowledge, they have not taken an offensive lineman in the first round. They've gotten offensive starters. Dominic Pooney last year, for example, in the third round, who was pretty good. Aaron Banks in recent memory in the second round out of Notre Dame. So they've drafted relatively high in the top 3 rounds to get offensive linemen, but they've never actually reached for a guy. And so I don't necessarily think this is the time to start for the Niners. They do need to get better in the trenches, but typically that's been improving around the edges. You know, they haven't basically invested major capital into that spot, and you could argue that it's been their downfall, especially last season as a result of that. But you now are going to have a quarterback that I believe is going to be handsomely paid, and we can get into whether that's fair or foul. But the San Francisco 49ers, to your point, have to protect Brock Purdy, and they just don't right now have a lot of starting caliber guys outside of a 37-year-old future Hall of Famer in Trent Williams, but he couldn't stay on the field last year. So there's a lot of question marks in the trenches, and offensive line absolutely is one of them. And I could see them, if there's a prospect that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan believe is, you know, kind of enticing enough at 11, I could see them reaching. They just have not done it before, and it would be a big shift.
Yeah, Evan, I agree, because I'm thinking of Mykel Williams as far as edge rush, Will Johnson, cornerback out of Michigan, maybe Derek Harmon, defensive tackle from Oregon. I can't see Will Campbell following all the way to 11, but that might be, where your bread is buttered if you're looking for the offensive lineman spot. You mentioned Brock Purdy, and obviously so much drama around, with Deebo Samuel departing, the Brandon Ayuk issues, and now from the depth chart standpoint, hoping that Christian McCaffrey can be healthy and back there. Your thoughts on, let's assume this Brock Purdy contract gets done in whatever dollar amount it is. I agree with you, fair or foul. You got to have the trigger man be in there, and I think the respect level for him is where it is. The most pressing need for you from a skill position standpoint, once this draft is over, where do the Niners pivot to try and get this team back into a very deep playoff run?
Well, I think as far as skill positions go, their wide receiver room a year ago looked like one of the most formidable in the NFL. And it's kind of a reflection, I think, of their entire roster, that one position group. You look at the combination of Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Juwan Jennings. Deebo a couple of years ago, an All-Pro. Brandon Ayuk during that Super Bowl run, second-team All-Pro, and obviously rewarded handsomely this last offseason. And even Juwan Jennings had some big playoff moments for the Niners. And 365 days later, that position group is looking as bare as any in the NFL. And it's pretty much going to come down to, can Juwan Jennings be the same type of receiver he was last year? And can Ricky Pearsall, your most recent first-round pick, be a player that plays like a first-round pick? Because he was stripped of that opportunity by getting shot preseason. He didn't have a great finish to the year. And obviously, Brandon Ayuk is going to miss quite a bit of time, having wrecked his knee against the New England Patriots midway through last season. So Brock Purdy doesn't have a whole lot of people to throw to right now. And that's why, again, there's so much invested in this upcoming NFL draft, to the point where if they went with a wide receiver in the first round or in the first couple of rounds, I think it would be a mistake, but I couldn't necessarily blame them, because they do not have many weapons for their $50+ million quarterback annually to throw to right now. At least that's what I think he's going to get paid. So that skill position group, to me, to kind of target, it's got to be the wide receiver room, because right now, looking around the rest of the NFC West, Devontae Adams has been added to the Rams. The Seattle Seahawks have an emerging Jackson Smith-Jigba. Marvin Harrison appears to be a star stud in Arizona. Everyone else around you has weapons for their quarterbacks to throw to, and right now Brock Purdy just simply doesn't.
By the way, talking to Evan Giddings here, got a couple minutes to go here. The Niners are the betting favorite to win the West next year, even though they're going to be going with a lot of younger players in this draft. They're plus $1.35 to get that done. Evan, that's the elephant in the room that you just alluded to, the price tag for Brock Purdy. I'm surprised it's not done yet. We know the affinity that Kyle and John have for their quarterback here, but normally you don't want to overpay. That's kind of been the thing. You had the rookie deal. That's going to go away. What do you think ultimately they do agree on? And is there a sticking point here as to why this hasn't been done yet?
I think there's somewhat of an internal power struggle when it comes to pen and paper with the San Francisco 49ers. And it is because, number one, they have had so much success. And so Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have gone to the brass and said, all right, well, basically signed the checks. Like, we're winning games. We're getting you guys into NFC Championship games and to potential Super Bowl runs. Now, coming off of last season, having paid the most cash in the entire NFL for a season that resulted in a 6-11 season and missing the playoffs entirely, the train has to stop. And ownership has forked over cash hand over foot. And Jay York, I think, is looking at Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, a little bit like trust fund children, and saying, no, this is now how much money you have, and you have to make it work. Prove to me that you can do what you have done before, which is build an organic roster through this draft, build it cheaply, build it young, and build it fast. And if they're going to be able to do that, well, then we can have a conversation about whether or not the Niners can make a deep postseason run. But to flip this roster and just simply go from old and expensive to young and cheap, I think is going to be really hard for this team to get to the postseason, nevertheless make a Super Bowl run.
Evan, great stuff. We really appreciate the time. Enjoy the draft next Thursday. Everybody give him a follow on X at Evan A. Giddings if you want the best of what's going on with the Niners. Come on back. Our best bets are next.